What do some of the most successful millionaires and billionaires in the world, like Tony Robbins, the famous personal development coach, Kyle Bass, the hedge fund manager who predicted the 2008 financial crisis, Richard Branson, the famous self-made billionaire and founder of Virgin Group, and entrepreneurs like the ones on Shark Tank, like Kevin O'Leary, Mark Cuban, and many others have in common. Many of them invest very similarly using 3 different strategies. The first thing they do is invest in asymmetric risk/reward ventures. In other words, they look to minimize the downside while maximizing the upside as much as possible. Tony Robbins, for instance, in his book, Money Master the Game, was looking for a place for his mother-in-law to live as good of a life as possible as someone who needed constant care in her old age. He wasn't always satisfied with the results of many different senior care living facilities. And after doing some research, there was a big problem in the amount of needed space and care for retiring people with conditions such as Alzheimer's and dementia. If you look at a post by Health Services Research, you'll notice that by 2030, there will be basically double the amount of retirees needing senior care in facilities like these. Baby boomers are going to retire off at a rate that will make it very difficult to provide proper care for all of them. They are retiring at a rate of around 10,000 per day, and it will only get worse in the future. So Tony Robbins saw an opportunity not only to find the best place to care for his mother-in-law, where she would enjoy the last few decades of her life, but also to invest in great senior care facilities and even help build them himself. One of the things he tries to do is invest in things that are almost impossible to fail. As more senior care is needed and the rising baby boomer and rising amount of retired baby boomers that need constant care increases, Tony Robbins, in his book Money Master the Game, talks about how he started to invest in building great facilities and in the opportunity of making a large profit from something that is only going to keep rising in the future, which is the industry of senior care living. The risk seems mitigated because we know that the amount of baby boomers out there that will need care that cannot be provided by their family members who aren't qualified to give it will keep increasing. So the investment in this area almost seems too perfect to ignore. Another example of asymmetric risk/reward, also mentioned in the book Money Master the Game, is from a hedge fund manager named Kyle Bass, who predicted and effectively bet against the U.S. subprime mortgage crisis in 2008. For more information on that, you can watch the movie The Big Short, which explains pretty much everything you need to know in a couple of hours about what happened and how terrible the 2008 financial crisis really was. As someone who has been a very successful hedge fund manager, he was trying to teach his kids, in a story he outlines in the book Money Master the Game, how to take as little risk as possible while maximizing the reward. One thing he did was invest in nickels. He put millions of dollars into nickels because, like pennies years before, nickels had actually become worth more in their melt value in what they were made of than the 5 cents that they are worth in the economy. Eventually, they'll have to make nickels in a lower cost way to continue to make them worth 5 cents. Something similar happened in the past with the copper that was used to make pennies. Because the melt value is worth more than the economic value of the nickel, there's pretty much no way that this could be a bad investment. And Kyle Bass knew that he could put as much money as he wanted into nickels without having much risk of losing any value in the future. This is just another example of asymmetric risk/reward, maximizing the upside while minimizing the risk. The second way many successful millionaires and billionaires invest is by minimizing the downside and not making too much of a commitment in the beginning. They always seem to have an exit strategy if needed. One example of this is Richard Branson. As an already successful billionaire and owner of Virgin Group, he had a bad experience on a flight and decided that he might want to create his own airline company. In an article by CNBC entitled How Richard Branson Started Virgin Atlantic with a Blackboard Selling $39 Flights, he covers the story about how he had a bad experience and decided to call up a Boeing representative named R.J. Wilson to make a deal to acquire planes to start an airline company that he would run his way, that would create a better experience than he had in his past flights. Branson convinced R.J. Wilson of the idea and how he would do it, and he convinced Boeing to lease him secondhand 747 aircrafts for a year, and if Virgin Atlantic did not do well, he could send them back without having to pay full price. This is just one example of minimizing the downside and having an exit strategy when investing in a new business. Another example is Tim Ferriss. When thinking about investing in a new business idea where he would have a podcast and interview interesting, successful people, finding the habits and routines that they used to succeed, Tim Ferriss wasn't completely sold that it would be a long-term fit. So he promised to do 6 podcast episodes. He scheduled them out with interesting guests and decided he would see how that went first before committing to anything beyond that. It later was probably by far the most successful business venture he's ever done outside of startup investing. He had an exit strategy. He committed to only a short period for his new business. If it failed, he would have learned, but it succeeded, and now he still does it years later to this day. Same thing with Virgin Atlantic and Richard Branson. The third strategy many millionaires and billionaires use when investing their money in business ventures, stocks, real estate, or anything else is they invest in what they know. One example is Joe Rogan, not really known as an investor, but has been a successful comedian, TV show host of Fear Factor, and podcast host of the Joe Rogan Experience. He invested in a company called Onnit. Onnit.com is a fitness and nutrition company all about optimizing the human body through the best strategies and tools. Jocko Willink, also not known necessarily for being an investor, but for his leadership. He was a Navy SEAL commander, now has his own podcast, and has invested in different companies to make himself very wealthy. One of which is Victory MMA and Fitness. Jocko Willink probably knows more about combat than just about anybody you've ever met. As a Navy SEAL commander and a jiu-jitsu expert, he invested in his own jiu-jitsu gym because that's what he knows. And in his interviews with Joe Rogan, you'll find out that that is all he invests in, is the things that he knows best. Another example is Shark Tank. Many of these investors come from different backgrounds but are all very wealthy in their own right. Barbara built a very large real estate business. Mark Cuban built a very large internet business. Damon built a very large fashion business. Lori built a very large sales company. These sharks tend to invest in the startup based on what they feel they have the best connections to and that they know the industry best. For instance, Mark Cuban might invest in many different tech companies and fitness companies. Damon might invest in things related to fashion, and Lori might help small household items get sold for different startups on the show. They invest in what they know best and where they have the most connection. Watch any episode and you'll see the trend. Last but not least, Kevin Rose, founder of Dig.com and very successful startup investor and app creator, in an interview with Tim Ferriss, outlines some of the things he thinks about when considering an investment. He invests in things he understands, but not in things he doesn't understand. For instance, in the Tim Ferriss Show episode 408, he talks about how he missed out on an investment with Netflix. He could have made millions of dollars off that by being an early investor, but simply admitted that he did not understand why the business would succeed. So he passed and does not regret it because he had so many other investments that he was more comfortable taking because of his background and because he knew them better based on the industry knowledge he had. He didn't invest in Netflix because he didn't know the industry as well or the business model either. Many of these strategies can be traced to books like Money Master the Game, podcasts like The Tim Ferriss Show, and TV shows like Shark Tank. But these three strategies of looking for opportunities with asymmetric risk/reward, minimizing the downside and having an exit strategy, and investing in what they know best are three of the main strategies I've found in common among the world's most elite entrepreneurs and investors. But as a full disclaimer, I am not a financial advisor and I do not claim to be. This video is for entertainment purposes and informational purposes only. You might consult with a registered financial advisor for any of these strategies related to investing, like a fiduciary advisor recommended in many investing books because of their lack of competing interests with your own. Unlike many financial advisors, you might look into fiduciaries because they do not live off commissions or get fees from the particular investments they make on your behalf. One place you can check that seems to be widely regarded as a trustworthy wealth management company is Stronghold Wealth Management. Again, this video is for entertainment purposes only. You should consult a certified financial advisor. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.